patrons, we've made it through another week of January. We've actually made it into February by now, and that means it's time for me to rank all the movies I watched during the 4th week of January. Actually, in just a couple days, I'll be dropping my video on all the movies I watched in the 5th week of January as well, because I'm a little bit late on this particular video. But let's go ahead and get started. I watched 12 movies in the 4th week of January, and this was a very mixed group of movies. This was pretty tricky because some of these ones I kind of had, I'll get to it a little bit, but this was a great example of why I have both the letter and the number score, because there's several movies in here that I thought, these are well-made movies, but they're kind of dull on the entertainment scale, like how engaged I am with them, and there's other ones that are like, this is really entertaining, but it's really bad too, and I don't always know how to rank those two things, so this one as a ranking is more me trying to give my feelings on some of these movies more so than fully a proper ranking, because I really didn't know how to rank some of these ones. Coming in last place is Final Destination 3, or I'm pretty sure it was actually 3, I don't know how to do D, 3D. So I've watched through the entire Final Destination series over the last 2 weeks, and it's a tough one to binge watch through, because if you're trying to rank them and think about them, I had to take lots and lots of notes because they start to blend together pretty quickly. But so this is where the franchise for me kind of really started to go off the rails, the roller coaster rails, as it happens in the movie. But yeah, it felt at this point in time, they just kind of went, all right, we don't need plot. Let's just go all in on schlock. The appeal of our franchise is watching these elaborate death mechanism, ways in which things fall apart and someone dies a gruesome death. That's what people watch for. So let's just fully embrace the schlock of what we are and go for it. And that's what this movie is. And that's what makes this difficult for me, because on a quality level, the graphics don't look good. There's no shortage of moments that are just so in your face the way that they're presented that you're like, I can't believe that you just actually put that on screen. I mean, you showed me the death very nicely, but there's like no artistic value to it. I mean, it's just designed for it to be like this guts spray at the screen. But at the same time, if you enjoy this kind of thing, and I can enjoy this kind of thing because it's like, this is Sharknado for me. I don't like the Sharknado movies as much because it's too far down this path, but these are just kind of like right in that spot where like I can have fun watching the schlockiness of this and the absurdity of the ways that they come up for people to die. And so I wasn't bored at all by this movie or anything like that. It's not last because it was boring, but it's just pure schlock. It's not quality filmmaking, and so that's why it's where it's at on this one. At number 11, a movie that's better made, but I'd rather watch Final Destination 3 more than this one. So that's like I said, where this gets tricky for me. Wide Awake, the M. Night Shyamalan film from before The Sixth Sense. It's got Rosie O'Donnell in there. It's got Julia Stiles in there as well. But it's about a boy going through an existential crisis of faith over a death in the family, but it's kind of a comedy, kind of a weird mix. It's put together nicely, especially compared, you take M. Night Shyamalan's career, and he's had several movies that just have incompetence in how they're directed and put together. This doesn't have any of that. It just doesn't have much spark of life either. It doesn't have something that's an immediate hook to it, because if you're wanting a movie about faith and doubt, this isn't necessarily the one I would go to. If you want a comedy, definitely not the movie I'm going to. If you want a family film, kind of a downer for that. So it just doesn't necessarily hit anything right. It just feels kind of, it's there, but not sure what to do with that. Coming in at number 10, another one. I didn't really know how to rank this one. Polar. This is a Netflix action movie, dark comedy that just came out. It's got Mads Mikkelsen, Casino Royale, Hannibal Lecter, a lot of different roles. And it's kind of, you could describe it as him doing Taken, him doing John Wick. So older actor decides to do an action movie. And so a lot of people are comparing it to John Wick, Taken, that genre of films. those are really bad comparisons. This movie is not like those films at all. It's not at all like John Wick. If you go into this movie thinking you're getting John Wick, you're going to be like, oh, this is garbage. What are they doing? This is terrible. If you go in expecting it to be taken, it's just not that. It's like a dark, very dark, cynical comedy. That happens to be an action movie as well. It's part of the hitman genre, so there's like things about old assassins trying to retire that ties back to these other movies. Guy with a set of schools ties back to these set of movies, but if you it's a different genre. Like when you talk about genres and subgenres, these are like polar opposite subgenres from each other. And so I think that's why some people had really negative reactions to it, and I think that's where a lot of that's coming from. It's also a movie that's not for most people. It's not designed for broad appeal or anything like that. It has a very like campy, over-the-top humor while having a lot of very just dark moments about people being killed and stuff like that. And it's just like, it happens as these things happen. So I dug it. It's not like great cinema, but I evaluate it like if I were to rent this from Redbox as an action movie, it would be one of the better Redbox action movies that you'd see in a given year. And so Netflix can be kind of like the alternative to Redbox at times. Netflix is this weird thing where it's got both Roma that's getting nominated for Best Picture, and then you've got all sorts of stuff that is kind of direct-to-video quality, and then every Bird Box and everything in between. And if this one was comparable to direct-to-video, Redbox, it certainly would be on the higher end of it. And it has a distinct style, flavor to it. Made me chuckle a little bit. It kept me engaged. I wouldn't mind watching it again. So even though it's low on this one, it's because there's some better things, I think, up here. But yeah, a movie that it reminded me of the movie The Big Hit from back in the 90s with Mark Wahlberg, except a darker, sicker version of that. But sort of in the over-top nature of the tone, Hitman's for Hire, that sort of thing. That's what it reminded me of. Coming in at number 9 is Final Destination 2. This movie kind of still had some of the attempts, I guess, at depth of the first film. Depths might not be the right word, but trying to have some ideas and explore if someone could see the future and death was coming after them. How would that play out with the various characters? And so I appreciated that about the film. Where it lost me a little bit is that the rules seem to be getting so convoluted, and it's when you create a franchise where everybody dies and that's your starting point for this movie is that everyone except one person died from the previous film. It just kind of makes you disengage a little bit from the story because you're like, okay, so we're just waiting for everybody to die. And even if they don't die, you're just going to kill them off in the beginning of the next film. Like, I don't, you lose me a little bit. And so it's still got the fun of the schlock of the kills. There's things about it that are really good. There's some interesting ideas, but it just got convoluted in the rules. And I think they should have found a better way to what to do with what the characters at the end of the movie. For the whole franchise, really. Found a better way so it's not just, and everybody died again. Okay, so now I know how all of these movies are going to end. At number 8 is First Man. I really didn't know how to rank this one. I'm almost kind of glad I didn't see this one in the theater to do a proper review for it because I don't really know what to do with it. So it's from Damien Chazelle, the guy that did Whiplash, the guy that did La La Land. Very talented director. And so if you watch this movie, there's great acting. Things about it are very well done. And they take the story of Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon, and this very interesting story, and make a pretty dull film. Like a very dull, emotionally detached film. And so some people really liked that about it, that it's character-driven. It wasn't action-driven. It was more about him and all this stuff. But it's a character study about a guy that's just so emotionally detached. Like my friend and patron over here, Rachel Wagner, she mentioned in one of her reviews, like, are they trying to present him as that he's on the spectrum? And as you watch it, that's what it feels like. He's this guy that doesn't know how to interact with people, that's like obsessive, like these things that are signs of being on the spectrum. And you're doing a character study about him, and so it just always feels like it's at arm's length. And there's all these, normally when you tell a story like this, you have a series of victories and losses as they're building towards the big finale. You have all these things that they're working towards something, and then when it fails, you really feel the weight of that failure, and then you move on to the next thing. And this movie doesn't really have that. It has the moments of failure, has the moments of victory, but the way they play out in the story, it doesn't have the normal, like, sense of victory, and it doesn't have the normal sense of loss. It's just like things happen. It's like, oh, he's sad all the time because he's faced a lot of death. And so what it was going for didn't click with me. Obviously, some people it really clicked with, but I kind of am in that crowd of people that I think is a lot of people. We really liked Damien Chazelle's previous work, and then this one I don't understand where he's going for. This is a guy that took competitive jazz drumming and made it super interesting. And then he does a movie about the most interesting thing in 100 years, or one of the most interesting things in 100 years, and makes it kind of dull. So it just fell flat for me. Not poorly made, but a movie that, like, I don't know why I would ever want to rewatch this one. All these ones below this on the list, I'd rewatch all not Wide Awake, but Polar, Final Destination movies. Entertainment level, definitely more rewatchable than First Man for me by a lot. First Man, better made, but they're the ones that are much more watchable. And this is why I have my two scoring systems to kind of put that language out there that I feel is the way that I talk about films. At number 7 is The Visit from M. Night Shyamalan. I put out a ranking of all of his movies, so I'll talk pretty quickly about this one. I dug this one. It's not him fully swinging for the fences. It's not the greatness of Sixth Sense, Unbreakable Signs. It doesn't have that magic spark that he had before, but it's like a simple little story, a clever idea that has the thrills. It's got a little humor mixed into it. It gets gross at times and in different sorts of ways, but it earns it throughout the film. And so he did this one for Blumhouse, and that feels like a great pairing for me. M. Night Shyamalan doing these kind of smaller films where he has an idea and he goes to Blumhouse, and it just feels right to me. Those sorts of high concept ideas. That's what this is. And so I dug it. At number 6 is Final Destination. Final Destination. The Final Destination is a totally different movie that I'll talk about in my next video like this. Final Destination, the original in the series, is just an interesting little take on a horror movie where you have this concept of what if someone had a premonition that they were going to die, they don't do something, they don't die, and then death is trying to track them down. And then thrown into the mix, they have some of these other little plot lines going on around them being investigated by the police, FBI, and stuff like that. That just kind of makes it feel like if something like this were happening, what would be the ingredients kind of thrown into the mix? It's kind of all done high energy. The deaths are just so elaborate and over the top that it's very interesting to watch. The movie came about from a couple of different people that had worked on the X-Files. And this doesn't feel like the X-Files at all, but you can feel the X-Files touches in the mix on it with things about it. And so it's just a nice little idea for a franchise that makes sense. Like, even as I have some of the movies lower on the list, they're very watchable movies. Even when they got schlocky, they're very watchable. This one wasn't full schlock. This one has tastes of the schlock in it. But beyond that, it's got a nice cast to it, a nice premise, and executed with a good bit of energy. Bringing us into the top 5 is a movie that I can't believe it took me this long to see. I've never seen this movie before, but The Last Boy Scout, which, if you don't know what this one is, it's a buddy cop-ish movie, because they're not really cops, but buddy cop movie with Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans. That's written by Shane Black of Lethal Weapon, Iron Man 3, The Predator fame, and directed by Tony Scott. So everything about that's like, how did I not see this movie up until this point in time? I don't know. And even beyond that, and it's got Halle Berry in it too. And as you're watching it, even more so, it feels like, since I hadn't seen it before, an action movie from all the era where I love all the action movies was just locked away in a vault and revealed, like, look, there's one more out there that's all the things. And so it's a very weird experience, because even watching it, because it was filmed right around when Lethal Weapon 1 was done, or, you know, within the 5-year period window there, same screenwriter, so a lot of the same locations, it feels in a lot of ways like cousin to Lethal Weapon, except with Bruce Willis in it. It's just very odd in just the visual style, the location, everything about it. Fascinating viewing experience. To me, it felt a little bit like a guy had a great idea, Lethal Weapon, and they went, what else do you got? And then he came up with something else for them, and it wasn't quite as good. That's kind of what it felt like for me, in stretching it a little bit more, a few more of the tropes, and then he saved the president once, and then this guy was this. It's like, okay, this is a little bit more forced than it needs to be, but at the same time, this is kind of my type of movie. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where there's a movie that feels like you should have watched it 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and you never did, and then you watch it and it's like, this really is a long-lost gem that somehow I'd never seen. That's what this experience was for me watching this movie of, there's one more of these out there that I hadn't seen. So I don't know if that's helpful for any of you, for me to describe it that way, but think like a little bit trashier, a little bit more B-grade level version of Lethal Weapon. That's what this one is. Coming in at number 4 is going to be the Lego Movie 2. And once again, this is tough for me to rank. Like, how do you rank a 25-year-old action movie that's your genre that with the latest Lego movie? But there you have it. I put out my review on my main channel for this one just a couple days ago, so I'll just give you the quick summarized version. It's a good follow-up. It's not a great follow-up. It's more of what you liked about the previous one, kind of doubles down on some of the meta humor and stuff like that. Just not as fresh. But all the stuff that you enjoyed, it's still there. All the energy is still there. So if you like the first one, this one's worth seeing. Just don't expect it to be better than the original one. Certainly if you watched the original and it was like, wow, this is so cool that they did this, and it had like this a special moment for you, that this movie's not going to be a special film. It's just a good film. It's a good follow-up. Coming in at number 3 is X-Men, the original one from the year 2000. And I would say that this is the movie that kicked off the modern era of comic book movies. A couple years before it, Blade kind of started to cut the path a little bit. And then X-Men is kind of the one that I view as the first film in this era. Blade is kind of its own standalone thing, as it's an R-rated film. It's based on a comic book. It's not based on a comic book that, like, most people identify Blade with Wesley Snipes, not with the comic book, whereas X-Men is known as a comic book property more so than Blade is. That's why I say all that. And this is the movie that gave us Hugh Jackman. This is where Hugh Jackman went from guy that did stage work to The Greatest Showman and all, all this fun stuff about him. As much as this movie kicked off an era, as much as this movie has started the franchise, I don't think it's as good as it could be or should be. And maybe that's a budget thing. Maybe that's their figure things out. It's very good. I'm not saying it's bad, but its place in comic book history, I think, transcends the actual quality of the film. The story's a little bit weak. The scales seem a little bit small, and it's a little bit light on action. But it's got a great cast, great world building going on, sets things up nicely for there to be better films within this franchise. But so that's kind of my quick take on this one, is that it's very important, but it's not, I don't think it's upper echelons of comic book movie in terms of the actual film's quality itself. In terms of its importance, yes, it is. Our runner-up this week is going to be A Christmas Story. Through some set of circumstances, my in-laws had never seen this movie, so my wife has been trying to schedule a date to watch it with them and with our kids, and somehow that didn't happen in December, so we did that in the middle of January. So we watched this one, of course, a Christmas classic. So quotable, so memorable, so many jokes that have just become part of the cultural conversation that everybody knows about. And so just a real little delightful film. I don't have too much to say about it because, if you haven't seen it, you need to go see it because it's a Christmas classic. And if you have seen it, you know what I'm talking about, of how just memorable everything about it is. But coming in first place, one of my favorites of all time, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So, the third film in this franchise, in some ways it's better than the first one, and I think the first one is the best adventure film ever made. And so this one, in certain ways, is also the best adventure film ever made. They found a way to kind of bring back the things about Raiders of the Lost Ark that made it amazing, primarily Nazis, relic hunting, globetrotting, all that fun stuff. They bring all that back, but it doesn't feel like a rehash because they very wisely went, okay, let's dig into his family. Let's make him a person more. And so then they bring his father into the mix. They get Sean Connery, which is kind of funny because he's only 12 years older than Harrison Ford, but somehow they pull it off in the film, and you've got James Bond, Indiana Jones, bantering back and forth, and it just absolutely works. So many memorable sequences, great action sequences, a lot of heartfelt moments, the most heartfelt of any movie in this series. And so they found a way to really parallel and run side by side with Raiders of the Lost Ark. And you've got that intro sequence where you have River Phoenix, who's, if by chance you don't know this, Joaquin Phoenix's brother, River Phoenix, played young Indiana Jones in the beginning of this movie. And unfortunately, he died of a drug overdose when he was very young. And so, you know, obviously his brother kind of went on to outshine him in certain ways, but he was this very big up and coming actor at the time. And so, you know, it's just neat to see that and little place in film history and everything like that. But anyway, a great film that is highly rewatchable. I've been rewatching it every single year, multiple times per year since 1989 when it came out. There you have it. That's what I watched this week. That's just how I rank them, kind of. They're just so different that I didn't even know how to rank them, but I did the best that I could. Tell me what you watched this week down below in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for